So let's start out. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself, like give like your own little promo?
The elevator pitch, as it were.
Yeah, what's your
Um,
what's your elevator pitch? Convince these people that you're a legit developer. Go.
Man, I was never good at this. I'm Rob, as you might have picked up. I've been working as a front end developer for about almost 5 6 years now. Quite a long time. Um, it goes faster than you might think. I gotta say. Um, Started out my first job, about 5 years ago. Started out junior developer and quickly quickly worked my way up from there.
Nice. Pretty cool. So some of these questions that I'm going to ask you, they came directly from audience members, which is pretty cool. People gave some feedback on some things they wanted to ask. So my first question for you is, what made you interested in learning to code, and what stage of your education or career were you in at that time?
So for me, it was pretty early. I always knew I wanted to be a programmer, work with some kind of technology. Um, I grew up. I don't know how old or young the majority of the attendees are here, but I started out like coding MySpace pages essentially.
Wait, are you
Um,
talking about just like changing your background with
yeah,
like
like the
the
profile and
HTML like
everything.
boilerplate stuff? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Wait, all right. Date yourself. Like how old were you at that time?
It was high school, so
High school? Okay, yeah.
I'm turning 30 this year. So
Okay, nice. Good. Glad we, just in case anybody wanted to age discriminate.
yeah, it's pretty early in my educational process. Uh, and then I went to college for a little bit. Didn't really work out, and then I did a nano degree through Udacity,
Okay,
and then got a job through that essentially.
that's cool. Um, what do you think has like changed about like the landscape for somebody who is just going like right into from high school, going right into like a coding sort of path, or like learning to code kind of journey in the last, 12 years?
Well, that's yeah, it's changed quite a bit, honestly. When I started at my first job, it was really kind of more the exception than the rule, that people come in being self-taught. There was a lot of like we're expecting bachelor degrees in computer science, that sort of thing. But certainly the environment was not uh, discriminatory in any way for me. I never noticed any problems like, oh, you don't have a degree, or at least they never told me that. They would just not respond on the job applications.
So you think that now we're more accepting of developers who come into the workforce self-taught than we were in the
Yeah,
past? Okay.
absolutely. Um, but it all depends on the individual, really.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that
but it's
makes total.
certainly it's very common. Um, I think for a while at Autobooks, the we didn't have anyone with any front end developers with a degree, traditional degree.
Yeah, yeah, that's Rob and I work at a startup, which I feel like is really more likely to
Yeah,
be
like
hiring.
obligatory plug.
the, really likely to be hiring, I feel like, people without that traditional background. So I think that totally makes sense.
Yeah,
Oh,
Michael
Michael.
Wolflog says, the stigma, degree stigma, and honestly, at this point, if some company said, we're concerned about the lack of a degree, I probably wouldn't want to work there anyway.
Yeah, totally. I feel like even large scale companies, like it's I think it was maybe EY, Ernst and Young, big four accounting program. They now had like a big thing, like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, where they were removing the requirement for a degree on a lot of their jobs,
Really?
because accounting firms do hire like a lot of technologists, really big ones like that. And it just made sense for them to stop looking at only only candidates with that
Because
degree.
people have like a wide variety of non-traditional educational backgrounds now. People are changing careers, that sort of thing. So it's very hard
Yeah.
to say, you must have a bachelor's degree in computer science. Um, you might find certain companies for higher level positions will be like, we want you to have a master's degree in computer science, but um, I think Amazon has that for one of their fairly high levels.
Yeah. Oh, here's a good question that a couple weeks ago I participated in the Code Academy Women in Tech panel, and we got tons of questions from the audience about like, do you need to have when you were in school, did you need to be a whiz at all of your math and science classes to be a developer? And obviously there are different jobs, but do you feel like you need to be a proficient in calculus and chemistry to do your job, Rob?
Not generally. There are things, computer science things, algorithmic knowledge, that sort of thing that definitely has uh, beneficial, like it helps you in your work, but it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm doing like logarithms and calculus. Generally speaking, there might be like certain companies that are doing very math heavy things and they're going to state up front, we definitely need like a math heavy background or physics heavy background. But for the majority of like front end stuff, I would say it's not generally required. And back end stuff maybe a little more, but I wouldn't say it's anything too crazy.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good.
It's definitely something that comes up in interviews though, is kind of like gotcha questions, and I don't know. It's interview culture is probably a whole nother. We could have a whole nother talk on that.
Oh gosh. Yeah, we'll get down to that because I do want to, but I kind of want to go a little like chronologically. Let's start with like maybe more things about how you started learning how to code. So what kind of goals did you set for yourself, and like how much time were you structuring and devoting to teaching yourself how to code?
Um, kind of has varied over the years. So when I was starting out, when I was going through this nano degree program through Utah City, a lot of it was um, more of like your traditional, like you're doing it every day for however long it takes to complete, right? And then when I got into my job, my first job, it was more of a situation where like I wanted to be learning, the stuff that we were working on and, additional things. So I would say, the first 3 years of my career, not this is like after I got the job, I would spend a good like 20 to 30 hours outside of work every week um, trying to learn and get better.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big time commitment. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. But, it really, accelerates your growth. There's a lot of things. I see a lot of junior developers who come into a company and they'll expect to be taught, um, and you really have to take responsible for your own learning, your own development, because it's not guaranteed that somebody's around to teach you.
What sort of skills did you start with, or what skills were the nano degree program sort of starting you off with?
So there's a really like it ended up being pretty much perfect for me because the skills that I learned to stack. Um, you guys probably haven't heard of this. It's called Knockout JS. It's not used anywhere. Don't use it. Um, but the company I had applied to at the time was using that, and I had going through the nano degree. They had graded projects, which is fantastic because like they have to work, and you publish it on the internet and they can look at it. So they looked at me and they were like, "Wow, this guy has no experience, and yet he has tons of experience in the exact thing we're doing." So it worked out pretty well for me.
Hmm. Yeah, no,
Um,
that makes sense.
So those skills are mostly like learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, pretty much. It's your
Okay.
basic for front end work. That's pretty much your bread and butter.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like that's kind of like for anybody who's doing like the full stack. I saw a couple of people are doing the full stack program on Code Academy. I think they really start off with the front end stuff, and
Yeah,
I've been working through very slowly the back end path, and even it contains tons and tons of JavaScript and some amount of HTML and CSS because it's hard to
yeah.
just probably build a standalone back end
JavaScript
project.
is very popular even on the back end nowadays. So
Yeah,
can't really go wrong with learning JavaScript.
yeah. Can you tell us about maybe some of the like specific projects that you worked on that you were either really proud of or kept you really like engaged and motivated?
From like before,
Yeah, from
from
like
like the
when you
learning
were,
mode.
yeah, like what really made you be like, I can do this. This is gonna work out.
Well, one of the big things I think a lot of learn to code, this kind of self-taught journey is people struggle with is, what do I work on? And the nano degree was great because it was like you're going to work on this and this and this, and it builds. So it's like you got like this little baby project, and then you build on it, and at the end you have like I ended up with like this web app that would query I think the Yelp API and the Google Maps, and you would display like the different restaurants in a specific place um, on like the map, and you could like click on the locations, and it would pull up the information about the restaurants.
That's cool. Yeah, and that's very practical. Oh,
So
somebody's asking, what is a nano degree?
so an nano degree is like Udacity's term for their it's like a course, but on steroids, really. Um, so if you look at the courses on like Udemy or Pluralsight, they're usually pretty focused on like a single subject, whereas they have like a front end nano degree, and it's like introduction to programming, introduction to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that sort of thing. So it's kind of like a boot camp, but it's more self-paced.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is it related to Udemy?
No, it's a different company.
Okay, because yeah, I feel like Udemy is similar in that it's just like a scroll through things on your own. I mean, in
Yeah,
Codecademy, it's like that too, I guess, but it's
I
very
think
much like
I
its
think
own.
nowadays though, in terms of like projects, the attendees could do. There's a lot of ideas out there of like, hey, clone Twitter, clone Hacker News, clone Facebook, that sort of thing. It doesn't really, frankly, matter what you do as long as you're practicing.
Yeah. Oh, somebody asked you if would you do it again? Would you do your nano degree again if you were to go back, or would you take a different approach?
I think I might do the same thing. It's hard to. So when I got my first job, React hadn't quite taken off yet, and React is the stuff I've specialized in now. Um, so it was kind of in that like ramping up phase. This is before React had a 1.0 release. That's when I got my first job. Um, so I don't really think I would change too much because just the way it worked out, like my first job landed me my second job, which landed me my third job, which then, you know, ironically also got me this job at Autobooks, the job at Benzinga.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that funny? Because I think that all the time where it's like if I could
Yeah,
go back, maybe I would do like a code boot camp instead of trying to go to business school. But it's like, you know, those things are, it's so hard because like, would I
yeah,
wind up where I am now if I had done that?
yeah. The
Probably not.
experience is cumulative. Like even if you're not directly using that knowledge, you obtained like how to troubleshoot, how to problem solve. Valuable experience. Um, yeah. So I mean, ironically, I was at Benzinga, and I had given a talk, and some dudes from Autobooks showed up, and we convinced them to use React for their front end rewrite. So basically created my own job here.
That was, yeah, I love that. That's taking control of your own destiny for sure, whether you knew it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty cool. Could you tell us about, I think something interesting that's come up in some of the conversations that have been happening sort of behind the scenes about like what it means to be like a self-taught developer is people are like, maybe you avoid the big expense of like a boot camp that might be 12 or $15,000 or a bachelor's degree, which at least in the US can be like $40,000 or more. But that doesn't mean that you're doing this totally like no cost. What are some subscriptions or tools that you paid for that either like were or were really not worth the money?
So I think the landscape has changed quite significantly, unfortunately. Um, but as I mentioned a couple times before, the Udacity Nano degree really, um, I'd pay for it again. You know, um, that was definitely worth the money. Not worth the money. I didn't really pay for a whole lot of stuff. Most of the stuff I was looking at was like on Reddit and Medium articles, that sort of thing, freely available.
Yeah. Do
Um,
you, this is another question I had for you. Do you spend a lot of time participating in like Reddit or Stack Overflow forums, either asking or answering questions?
so not anymore. Um, and the reason for that is kind of like the skills I'm focusing on building now. It's not so much programming skills, but like soft skills. You know, planning, getting better at because everything builds. So like people often ask like, okay, now I know like JavaScript. What's like advanced JavaScript? But really, it's just you apply the basics more and more creatively, and you just get better at it. So there's not really like advanced programming. Um, there's like patterns and stuff you can learn that will help you, but ultimately it's all like the same. Um, did that answer your question? I think I rambled a little bit there.
No, I guess, yeah. So you're saying that you don't spend as much time in like these kinds of forums anymore just because at some
Right.
point you don't
It's
you don't need to, you kind of like graduate
yeah,
from.
it's not useful to me specifically anymore. But if the first 3 years of my career, I definitely spent a ton of time on Reddit and on Medium articles. I will say the caveat now is that Medium articles don't have like library versions on them. And it was certainly the case when I was reading them that you had to be careful the information you were reading was not outdated. But you have to be very careful now because there's an additional 5 years of history um, on top of that. So
Yeah. And it's funny, I feel like before I worked in tech, like I knew about Medium, but just because it would sort of felt like another like, this is gonna sound goofy, but like Huffington Post or something. Like just like literally anybody could just
yeah,
go there and write whatever like BS they wanted to.
no, that's
Um,
exactly what happens, and that's the problem. Is you can find some really good articles if you know like specific authors, but if you don't know who the authors are, then
yeah.
somebody might have just finished writing their first to do app 5 minutes ago, and they wrote, "Here's how you write a to do app." Um, it's some kind of like SEO, personal branding thing.
Yeah. No, that makes yeah, that makes sense. The credibility can be questionable. Did you have any like books that you read? I feel like sometimes I see people recommending like books, and I find that so as somebody who is a reader but has yet to buy like any kind of books about
Yeah.
technology.
So there, I have read some, like one or two books.
Just a book or
It's
two.
just a book or two in my life. Um, there's some good lists out there of like the classic programming books. I think those are less important when you're first starting out, but as you start to grow, um, refactoring. Martin Fowler is a great author. Um, Robert C. Martin's a great author. Um, there's a lot of books I haven't read yet that are like considered programming classics that I probably wouldn't concern myself with in the first 3 years of a programming career. Um, but books, even more so than Medium articles, are definitely um, it's on paper, it can't be changed after it's printed. So
Yeah, my boyfriend just got a book in the mail for like the kind of work he does. He works in advertising, and it was something called like new terminology. And he told me it was $50 new, and he bought it for $5 used. And I was like, well, how new is it? And he opens it up. It's like 2004, 2006. Like, it's like I
yeah,
don't think those are the new terms anymore.
I
So,
mean the good authors go back and they'll publish a new version. Like the refactoring book, for example, got converted from Java to JavaScript in a second edition. I think just came out last year. So that one's a classic.
let's see. Somebody says, can't tell you how many times I went to the JavaScript book by John Duckett looking for a chapter on promises.
I will say, actually, you know what? There's shoot, is this like JavaScript the hard way or something like that? JavaScript the hard parts? No. There's like this really great. It would be really great if I remembered what it was called. You don't know JS. That's what it's called.
Okay.
It's a book that's on GitHub. If you want to learn JavaScript, read that book.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, it's called You Don't Know.
You don't know JS.
You Don't Know JS. Okay. I'm just putting in the chat so people can copy and paste it into their browser if they want to look it up. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Do you have, can you think of any mistakes that you made or like rabbit holes specifically you went down that might, some pitfalls that newer learners could avoid? Any mistakes that you made?
So mistakes. Most of the mistakes. So it's hard to do this because most of the mistakes are around like work specific things, learning specific things. I'm not sure you can really make a mistake by learning things when you're first starting out. It might feel like you'll never. So let's say, this hypothetical situation, you're studying React, and then you get a job in writing Vue. Um, there's a lot of still like concepts that still transition over, even if it's not the exact thing you were studying. So languages, a lot of language programming, it's all transferable once you know enough about programming itself, and you can pick up another language. So I really wouldn't say um, you can go wrong. Although one thing I do see often from more inexperienced developers is this temptation to go and learn a ton of things. Like you'll hear this like, "Oh, I'm going to learn Angular this weekend," and you're just like, you're not you're not going to learn Angular in a weekend. Um, not all of it anyway, and it's certainly not enough to impress someone in an interview. I would say focus on a set of libraries. Focus on stuff that's transferable like JavaScript, like basic APIs in JavaScript itself, rather than trying to learn every framework under the sun, because you can take years and years and years to learn all of this, all the front end ecosystem stuff.
Are there any skills you wish you had started investing your time in sooner?
Probably GraphQL. I think I started learning it when I got to Autobooks, but um, it's not like a deep regret. It's more of like a
Wish a
that was
little.
kind of cool. I wish I'd really learned more about it earlier. Um, but the the specialization I've taken is pretty popular, so there hasn't been a lot of like, man, I really need to know that. Um, for me at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. So focusing more on some of that like job related stuff. Um, a question that I did see more than once come in. People wanted to know things like how many jobs did you have to apply for before you got hired, or like how long was it before you even started applying? Like they wanted like how did you know you were
Sure.
ready to start applying?
So the way you know you're ready is when people start calling you back. Just you just apply to as many jobs as possible. It's a numbers game, 100%. Um, and the first time, I think I got pretty lucky with that first job. I think I applied to maybe 5 jobs, 5 or 6, and they were the only ones who ever responded to me. By the way, like so, it's kind of like it's kind of like really rude for the companies and the recruiters to not get back to you. So if you find a recruiter who's like, yeah, they didn't think you were good enough in this area, then that's a probably a good person to work with. Because a lot of recruiters will just be like, on to the next person.
um, yeah, that makes sense.
But so I never really felt like I was ready to start working. Um, there was a lot, there's a lot of imposter syndrome out there, and I certainly had it pretty bad. But then that was the thing, though. As soon as I got that first job, I was like, I know more than these guys. Like,
Yeah.
um, there's a lot of like arbitrary filters out there, which is works against a lot of people, and it's not like specific to people who are self learners, but it's brutal out there, and you gotta apply and apply and apply some more,
Yeah.
and eventually people will get back to you.
I feel like, have you ever seen those memes where it'll be like somebody's applying for a tech job and it will ask for like 10 years of experience
Yeah,
in like a technology that's only existed for like 5 years or something?
yeah, I've seen that. I think one of the engineers who works on React posted like requires 7 years of experience in React, and it's only been around for 5 at the time. So yeah, I mean that's a real thing. Usually though, usually it's because the HR managers are writing those job descriptions, and the people who actually interview know better. So even if you don't quite meet up for or sorry, meet up with the requirements, you may want to apply anyway. Because a lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, the requirements listed are really like, man, we'd love it if somebody walked in the door with all of these things, but they'll probably accept something less than that. Um, and quite frankly, for a junior entry level position, the bar, like, people don't really expect you to know that much.
Yeah. So you can learn on the job.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I did want to talk about, and Rob and I discussed this a little bit earlier today. I asked him if he would be comfortable sharing his portfolio with you guys because somebody asked to see it.
Yeah. Um, so this is kind of an interesting thing. So the reason why portfolios are common is because when you're first starting out, you don't have a lot of um, professional credibility, right? Like, nobody knows who you are. Um, Quite frankly, nobody really knows who I am either. So like, that's not much different. But you don't have that work experience, so people like to see like your code, like how you might want to approach problems. They want to get inside your head. Um, and I don't really have a portfolio that much anymore because for the last 5.5, 6 years, I've been working on things that aren't open source. So if somebody asks me like, "What's your portfolio?" I'll be like, "I can't show you, but I can describe it to you." Things I've done. So I used to have one, right, when I was starting out, um, and it's just become less important. To like as the experience goes up, the portfolio is less relevant, but it's always a bonus. It's always a bonus if somebody has one.
Yeah. And I think it's, how long did you say you've been a developer for? How many years?
It's about six.
Six.
About
So
six.
I feel like, to go in 6 years from obviously needing that portfolio in order to land a job to it not really being that important for the kinds of jobs that you have now, right? I feel like that's,
It's not even 6 years,
yeah,
even. So as soon as you get that first job, like you've got your foot in the door. Well, I shouldn't say first job, but as soon as you've got around a year's worth of experience, I think people are like away. They let their guard down a lot more. Of like, who is this person? Like, I want to see a portfolio of like a million things and see their code or anything like that.
yeah. Somebody's asking here about if you think freelancing is a good way to get credibility, but like, I don't know about you.
So,
I feel like contractors are maybe more common in the space.
yeah, contractors are really common in programming. There's a lot of recruiting firms that do exclusively contract to hire, but you'll usually be a W-2 um, with the contracting firm rather than a pure contractor. Um, I did,
For those of you who are outside of the U.S., W-2 is a tax form we have here that is just tied to being more of a permanent full-time employee
yeah,
somewhere.
excellent point. Yeah. So freelancing, it all depends. So if you can negotiate, I've never done freelancing, but if you can negotiate, like, um, you own the ability to display like these are the work I've done. This is like snippets of the code. It can be a way to work on those projects. But the other part of that is who's going to hire you freelance if you don't have prior experience? And I'm trying to discourage anyone, but it's just, um, and there's also a lot of like scamming in that space of like people refuse to pay for work, stuff like that. So there's this trap of like, especially in photography or the arts of doing it for the exposure, right?
Yeah, that's so funny.
Never do anything for free.
Yeah. Oh, Michael's looking. Somebody build him a Facebook for
Yeah,
$500. No problem.
exactly.
No problem.
There's a lot of that, and then there's a lot of, okay, you built it. I don't think I should pay you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
And
a
like
whole
you said,
nother like
common.
layer of problems that come along with contracting like that. Um, that said, there are consulting firms out there that they'll pay you, um, and kind of the little secret about that is they're paying you. I don't know what the entry level rate is anymore, but let's say it's $25. Let's say they're paying you $25 an hour, U.S. dollars. They're going to bill you out at like 50. So if you're
Yeah.
okay with that, like it might work for you. But
Yep, that is. I've been on the other side of that equation, and yeah, it is true. Somebody's making a lot of money off of you to place you. Like
oh yeah,
nobody's doing it out of the kindness of their heart because they love
oh yeah,
human resources. So, yeah, that is a good point. But probably a good way to break into the field because I feel like the requirements are probably going to be a little lower. Let's see here. Um, Do you
so a
think you
couple.
had a steeper learning curve than maybe some of your peers with a more traditional background um, after you were hired? Like, were there things where you were like, oh man, like this is something
Absolutely
I'm
not.
passionate
Um, Yeah, no, just as long as
Just no.
is the short of it. I've interviewed a lot of people with master's degrees in computer science that had absolutely no idea how to program. Like, it all depends on the person, and it's just I think once you're like the work is so different from what you're learning in school, and I've got quite the chip on my shoulder against universities um, in the U.S. I don't know if it's different in Europe or other parts of the world, but they absolutely do not prepare software engineers for the work they will actually be doing because the
Yeah.
people who teach them have been teaching them for 20 years and they're like, I'm never changing my course because I don't want to have to work.
Yeah. I mean, even when I went to business school, the same could be said for accounting. Everybody was teaching you how to do accounting and like, and nobody's teaching you, the fact that, accounting happens entirely online now. So I think, yeah, that's very true, like across fields, as if curriculums are not being updated consistently to reflect the way the job market is changing. You're paying a lot of money to potentially learn some outdated
And there's
skills.
even some of that in some of the boot camps, like teaching people outdated stuff. It's it's quite the racket. They're basically scamming people. So
Yep. Yeah, and that's a lot of money to invest in something that
yeah,
you know,
especially if you're going through a boot camp that has the oh it's free, and will take 10 to 15% of your first year's salary.
oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was a system. That's terrible.
It's horrible. Like it's just an incredible amount of money to lose.
Yeah. I mean, especially in, software engineers make good money, but pretty much any job in your first year, taking
Yeah,
10
I
to
mean,
15% of it is really going to not leave you with that much left over for spending. Unlike,
I don't know what the entry level ones are really starting out today, but I know it's a lot higher than when I started.
the times have changed, Rob.
Oh
There's
yeah,
been inflation.
inflation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, another thing.
If only I'd negotiated to be paid in Bitcoin.
Yeah, you really missed the mark on that one.
Oh yeah.
As long as it's not, wait, what's the other one? The other,
Dogecoin?
yeah, Dogecoin. I feel like that one's less predictable. I'm not sure. Let me see here. I'm trying to think. Oh, there's a couple questions now in the chat have come up. People are asking you about remote work. Like, have you always been able to do it? If you do it now, which I already know the answer to that one.
Yep.
And your thoughts on it.
Um, there are full remote jobs. Um, I'm not quite sure what you mean by like how it works. I haven't been working remote the entire time, um, just since the whole COVID thing.
Rob
Um,
used to sit like 3 feet from me one time.
yeah, it's horrifying. um, so yeah, they're out there. I think they're less open to people who have no prior experience, and especially so to people who have no prior remote experience. Nowadays, everyone kind of has remote experience, so it's less of an issue. But unless it's like a company that is absolutely dedicated to, we are 100% remote, every single person is remote. Um, they might want you to come in and kind of like babysit
Yeah.
if you're first starting out. Remote work could be, yes, yeah, I do think it could be a disadvantage for new developers. Um, I think you see two extremes with junior developers is either they ask you a ton of questions or they don't ask you any questions at all and they just sit there silently struggling and then they quit. Um, so yeah, I think the social dynamic of let's say chat IMs is different, right? Because I don't know why, but it's seen as more disruptive to send someone a message than it is to like look over and see if they're busy and kind of like tap them on the shoulder, um, and just ask a question.
Yeah, I feel like there is another good little nugget of advice you snuck in there is that when you do get your first developer job, like, ask the questions, like ask
Yeah.
your coworkers, like, if you don't know something,
So
don't
yeah,
spend too long
absolutely.
studying
In that
this.
vein, one thing I would say is you want to like instead of just asking questions, you also want to say like um, this is the problem I'm running into. These are the steps I've taken. This is what I've looked up and what I've learned. Um, it's it can be very distracting to others when you're like coming to them with a problem with no context. So you want to make it as easy as possible for the other person to answer your question and kind of guide you to the correct answer. Um, but yeah, absolutely. So I've definitely had junior developers working with me before. I look over, in the time of the office and be like, man, that guy's like this half of the day. Maybe I should put him out of his misery and ask what's going on. Um, yeah, there's certainly been a few times that has happened and be like, hey, uh, can I help you?
No one can see you holding back your tears if you're working fully remote. So, Julie's asking for your thoughts on apprenticeships or internships. Did you ever take one?
um, I did not, but if you're thinking of, I think Germany has like this awesome like apprenticeship, um, like model where the vast majority of people get apprenticeships as part of university. I think it's fantastic. Internships, some companies are like, yeah, let's get a bunch of interns in here, and then they have no idea like what kind of work to assign them. So it depends on the company, really, because it might it might show up. You might show up, and they're like, hmm, we should probably get that guy something to work on like a month later. Um, and I mean, if you're being paid to be there, then you're being paid to be there, but you're probably not getting out of it what you expected to, right?
Yeah, totally. Um, how much time do you devote now to learning new skills or figuring out what to learn and then deciding like how much time you want to spend on those things that maybe you're not using for work but would like to keep up on?
Hmm. So I think the vast majority of people who are at a senior level kind of slow down in outside of work learning. Um, so how much time do I devote currently? Uh, Probably about 10 or 20 hours a week,
That's
depending
still
on
a
the
pretty
week.
big commitment. It's like kind of
I
another
really
little
enjoy it.
part-time job.
I
Yeah.
really enjoy it personally. Not everyone does, but um, I really enjoy reading. Nowadays, I'm reading a lot of like business kind of books. You know, more not managerial stuff, but more like strategy, that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Do I teach other junior developers on the job? Sorry, I'm totally hijacking your moderatorship.
No, I love it. I
Please
love
stop
that
me.
you're reading the chat. No, go for it. I love it. Yeah, take whatever questions you want out of this chat.
I do teach other junior developers on the job. Um, it's there's not really at Autobooks. There's not really like a formal program of like this is what I teach you. It's more of like every week I've got open time slots with the other front end developers, and we go over like how they do in that week, like just building relationships with the other developers, mentoring, helping them with current projects, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Could you tell us about maybe like a mentor you had in your career, or if you didn't have one, what
I
you
didn't.
wish you had in one?
I didn't have one, and that's
I'm sorry, that's so sad.
honestly that's kind of why I like to do that at not only this job but previous jobs of trying to help teach people, because it's a very common situation for junior developers to come in and nobody ever like takes the time to teach them up and help them grow, which is why I say to all of you, you have to take responsibility for your own learning. You can't expect to be taught. It's not school anymore. This is your career. You have to take responsibility for it. But there are companies out there that do, you know, make an active effort to do those mentorships and assign people like this is your this is your new best friend essentially. Um,
So somebody's asking about what are the downsides of being a developer and what stresses you out the most?
I like to think I'm a pretty chill guy. Um, would you would you agree, Julia?
You're pretty even keeled. I've never
I'm
heard
pretty
Rob
chill.
once like raise his voice or even really
I
sound
have a
more
naturally
than
quiet
mildly
voice, so
annoyed.
it's like you probably wouldn't even tell. um, the stress is it's different now. And there was a situation earlier of like I'm looking over at my other monitor of we have a production deployment tomorrow morning. Something broke. We just found out. Um, Fix it now, please. Um, and those things happen a lot. Um, and I'm kind of like I was telling you earlier, like I'm kind of numb to it at this point. Like it doesn't phase me, but you do see a lot of people come in and they're not expecting it, so they're like, everything's broken. Like, and
But the right attitude is everything's broken.
this is fine. This is fine.
Yeah, you guys have no idea how close we came to this actually having to be delayed tonight.
Yeah, pretty
um,
much down to the wire, actually. Um,
um, okay, cool. Well, that said, I think that's about all the time we have for questions, and we'll transition to some chapter announcements in a moment. But I just want to say thank you so much, Rob. Really appreciate your time and your expertise coming in here today.
it's well, thank you. I don't really consider myself that special, but I appreciate it.
I think you are very special.
Well, you guys